I have a 4-year-old daughter, and her name is Lily. This is Lily. And you'll see she's obsessed with superheroes. She has Batman pajamas. She has a Spider-Man toothbrush. And every time she sees a stick, it becomes this weapon to take out the evil baddies. And every box becomes her Batmobile. And to be honest, I'm not sure where she first learned about superheroes, although she has older cousins. So I'm sure they played a part. And as her mother, I was horrified to find out that my darling daughter was exploring such grown-up issues of good and bad, of life and death at such an early age. And I wondered, where had I gone wrong? But I came to realize that this hero narrative is so ingrained in our culture that it's nearly impossible to escape. And what's more, our brains are hardwired to lap up this narrative just as Lily devours chocolate ice cream. And our desire for a good hero story is so powerful that it can often spill over to real life. And it's easy to see why. I've spent the past decade working with business leaders, both corporate executives as well as entrepreneurs, to make sense of the changing landscape around them. And the world can feel sometimes like a very dark and scary place. From inequality to violent conflict, from coral reefs to climate change, these issues can feel so big, so overwhelming. Wouldn't it be wonderful if a hero would swoop in and save us? Someone like Angelina Jolie on her white horse, or Leo DiCaprio in all his bearded glory. Or what about this new pope? Maybe he'll save us. Or a shopkeeper in the square. But what if there is no hero? What if that hero you've been waiting for is you? Yes, you. And you. And you. The pressing issues that we face are real and complex, and it will require more than a caped crusader to save us. It will require inspiring and mobilizing the millions of people just like you working inside business, inside governments, inside nonprofits, everywhere. Change will require people inside the system doing the sometimes unsexy work of driving change from within. Change requires you. It requires all of us to step up and step in. Like Rebecca Moore at Google. Rebecca and her team at Google are working with Amazon, a Brazilian nonprofit, to provide real-time satellite monitoring of the Amazon rainforest. Now, prior to working with Google, Amazon had very little visibility into what was actually happening on the forest floor. The Amazon is huge. It's nearly the size of the entire United States. And yet, to monitor illegal logging, Amazon had to work with data that could be a year or more out of date. Now, Rebecca and her team provide computing power. They provide storage. They provide software expertise that allows Amazon now weekly and in some cases daily access to satellite images of the Amazon. So now, if a tree falls in the forest, it creates an alert for activists. Now, Rebecca is a type of change agent or reformer that we've started calling a social intrapreneur. So not an entrepreneur, but an intrapreneur, somebody inside an existing institution applying the assets of that company to advance the good. Now, let me be clear, this isn't about corporate philanthropy. This is about fundamentally reimagining the reason for being for your company. It's about taking your company's strengths and addressing real-world problems that need solving. So what does it take to be a social intrapreneur? Well, I've observed 5 elements that are core to being an effective change agent. So let's start with perspective. Being a social intrapreneur requires a reframing of work, and in fact, the world. It requires a belief that you can make a difference, and that you and business have a role to play. Of all the many entrepreneurs I've met, they share a common trait, and that is to see opportunity in even our greatest of challenges. And to borrow the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, intrapreneurs are prisoners of hope. Now, this is Sam McCracken. This is one of the very first intrapreneurs I met. Sam is, as you can see, a basketball coach. He's also a Native American of the Sioux tribe in Montana. And he happens to work for Nike, one of the most iconic brands on the planet. Now, Sam's Native American community, unfortunately, is battling epidemic levels of diabetes. And for Sam, this is personal, because sadly, in 2001, his mother passed away from complications of type 2 diabetes. When Sam began his entrepreneurial journey, he wasn't working in a fancy corporate executive suite, but was working in a warehouse in Wilsonville, Oregon, when he had an idea. He said, I work for one of the biggest sports companies in the world. There must be a way here in my role at Nike, I can do something to help my community. And as he told me later, he didn't have a grand plan. He heard a need in his community, and he thought he could help. Sam channeled hope. So he began working with leaders in the community to organize fun runs and walks, and they provided discounted Nike product to incentivize people to take part. And as the momentum built around his project, he shared his idea internally. And he was so passionate, this passion was infectious. And a team of footwear designers approached Sam and said, hey, we want to help. We want to design a shoe specifically for your community. We'll call it the N7. Now, this would be a first for Nike, designing a shoe specifically for a community that also embodied the Native American principles of sustainability. And that is designing for 7 generations ahead and 7 behind. Now, that was over 10 years ago, and today Sam is the general manager of Nike's N7 division, an entire range of products, the proceeds of which are used to invest in physical activity for Native American and Aboriginal youth in the United States and Canada. Now, entrepreneurs like Sam are not short on passion, but what will increase the chances that your idea will become successful is if you can connect what you care about with what the company cares about. So how is your innovative idea going to generate profits? How is it going to strengthen the brand? How is it going to open new markets? Meet another entrepreneur. This is Miriam Sidibe. Miriam has a very interesting qualification. She has a PhD in public health focused on hand washing with soap. She is one of the only people in the world to have this distinction. Miriam is very, very passionate about soap, and so much so that she gave a TED Talk on the topic just a few months ago. But this isn't a trivial issue. How many of you knew that 6.5 million children each year never live to see their 5th birthday? And that diarrhea and pneumonia are among the top killers of children under 5. And many of these deaths could be prevented simply by using soap. So when Miriam left, when she graduated with her PhD, instead of going to work for an NGO or going to work for government, she went to work for Unilever. She believes that business is the most effective pathway for providing people with information and access to this life-saving product. And when she joined Lever, she became an integral part of the Lifebuoy brand team, helping the soap salespeople see the connection between their product sales and lives saved. And together with a number of partners, they've been undertaking one of the largest health campaigns in the world, reaching 183 million people in 16 countries. And in those markets, Unilever's business has gone up and child mortality has gone down. Now, Miriam knows for many people this link between business and health is incredibly uncomfortable. And yet for her, the results speak for themselves. That profit isn't a dirty word. It's literally saving lives. Now, organizations like Unilever, in which entrepreneurs work, all have one thing in common, and that's people. So whether you work for a small startup or a global corporation, if you want to drive change from within, you have to master a special talent that I'll call people thinking. So meet our third entrepreneur. This is Miriam Turner from Interface, a global carpet company. Now, I know you're not all instantly thinking of innovation and sustainability and social impact when you think about carpets. But in fact, Miriam and her colleagues at Interface have an ambition to make their carpet company the most sustainable on the planet. And their current project is called Networks. Now, how many of you knew that 10% of the debris that ends up in our seas each year comes from discarded fishing nets? It's an astonishing figure. It's a massive source of marine pollution. And yet Miriam and her colleagues have a solution. They're working with local fishing communities to recycle those nets and use the raw material to create new carpets. So it's an incredible solution. And Miriam is what I would call a serial entrepreneur. That is, she's undertaken a number of entrepreneurial projects and experienced her fair share of setbacks. But what I find interesting is that Miriam doesn't see these setbacks as failures, but is rather creating the conditions for each of her next successes. And when I spoke with her, she shared with me two very important lessons about people thinking. The first is that as an entrepreneur, you are a bridge builder. You are creating a bridge from today's reality to tomorrow's possibility. But you can't race people along that bridge. You have to take them slowly, step by step, stone by stone, removing the fear and risk out of that journey. So have a big, bold vision, but take small steps to build trust and confidence for people along the way. And the second thing Miriam shared with me about people thinking is the need to engage people at a human level. We're all emotional creatures. So instead of approaching somebody as the CMO, the CTO, or the CFO, approach them as a fellow human being. Now, in Miriam's case, she took members of her senior management team to a small village in India so they could see firsthand what life was like for people living in extreme conditions of poverty. And this visit touched those team members so deeply. It created an emotional connection for them to that issue. So much so that even when the project encountered obstacles, they continued to invest in Miriam because they believed that addressing poverty through their supply chain was the right thing to do, and they trusted Miriam to find a way. So finally, entrepreneurs are doers, or more specifically, prototypers. So in the words of David Kelly, who's one of the founders of IDEO, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 10,000 pictures. And entrepreneurs really take this advice to heart. They work tirelessly to bring their ideas off the page. So this is Nick Hughes. He's one of the entrepreneurs behind M-Pesa, which is Vodafone's mobile money transfer service that's enabling millions of people around the world to transfer money on their mobile phone as easy as sending a text message. And can you imagine always having to transact in cash? How would you pay your bills or your rent? How would you manage your day-to-day transactions without access to your debit card? Well, M-Pesa is reaching previously unbankable customers with the same security, access, and convenience as a traditional bank account. But did you know that M-Pesa started out as a hunch and as a prototype? So Nick and his team at M-Pesa saw an opportunity to use Vodafone's mobile telephony platform to support the growing microfinance market in Africa. And in particular, they thought they could help microfinance borrowers more conveniently receive and repay loans by using their mobile phone. So this was a super innovative idea. And when they approached senior management, they unfortunately received pushback. People inside the company at the time didn't see themselves in the business of banking, but rather selling airtime. Fortunately, Nick and his team didn't give up. They went and applied for a DFID Innovation Challenge, and they won. And they received £1 million of risk capital in order to prototype their idea. So they packed up, they went to Kenya, they got stuck in the market, and they prototyped. And they learned a ton. They learned that people were using M-Pesa in myriad ways beyond what they'd originally envisioned. People were settling up with a shopkeeper. They were hiring a taxi. They were using it to send money to relatives in far-flung locations. And as they learned, they adapted, and the new version of M-Pesa was born. But now, when they went back to senior decision makers, they had real customers, real revenue, not just PowerPoint slides. And the Vodafone model has been so successful, it's been rolled out beyond Kenya to 9 other countries, and is now being used to support other areas of need, such as mobile health. So, entrepreneurship is about perspective, connecting your passion with profits, people thinking, and prototyping. But there's another thing. And I think perhaps the most important thing about social entrepreneurship. It's not that we're finding new forces to save the world. It's that through this process of internal change-making, we're actually finding ways to save ourselves. Social entrepreneurs are some of the most self-actualized people I have ever come across. They are showing up to work each day living their values, being fully themselves. So I'd like us to try a little exercise, if you'll indulge me. could you close your eyes for a minute and take a few deep breaths? And still with your eyes closed, imagine a moment in your life where you experienced a tremendous sense of meaning or purpose. Perhaps even a spiritual connection with your reason for being on this planet. Now, maybe it was the birth of a child, or a walk in the woods, or perhaps helping a dear friend. Now, sit with that moment for a minute. What did it sound like? What did it look like? How did it make you feel? Now you can open your eyes. And I'm just curious, how many of you remembered moments in your personal lives? Yeah. And how about at work? A few hands. So what if we could take the magic of this feeling of purpose into the workplace, right? What if together we could transform our institutions into places where we show up as fully ourselves, making a positive impact on people? What if instead of work being a place where 65% of people report being disengaged, work was a place where we could be fully ourselves? What if work wasn't about soulless quarterly reports, but was about measuring the prosperity of our communities? And what if business wasn't based on a growth model that concentrates wealth and pillages our environment, but was an activity that actually restored the health of our ecosystems? Now, you won't find any of these questions on an entrepreneur's job description or performance evaluation, but these are exactly the big challenges that they're after. So, how are you going to tap your inner entrepreneur? I'd suggest 3 things. First, as you're doing today, get out of the office. I've not met a single entrepreneur or intrapreneur who had their aha moment sitting behind a computer. Next, find your people. Find a mentor. Find a champion. Find other intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs. And try something. Anything, even if it's small, even if it's under the radar. As the late Peter Drucker might have said, entrepreneurship isn't an art and it isn't a science, it's a practice. And finally, remember who you're doing it for. Thank you.